Hey, what's up you guys? It's Jason, your FLX e-bike specialist. Wanted to come to you and help you out with some of the maintenance. At some point, you're going to have to change the belt on your Babymaker Pro. I wanted to go step by step so that we can give you a good tutorial on just how to do that. For some of you guys out there, mechanical inclination, this will be very simple. For others, just follow the video step by step and this will be a breeze for you too. The first thing I want to go over is the tools that you're going to need to swap out your belt. You will need a replacement belt. I don't have the new one in front of me. For happenstance or for the sake of the video, we're just going to take this belt off and we're going to reinstall it. But go ahead and follow along and I'll get you that step by step. The first part is going to be to go over the tools that we're going to use. The first one that I want to touch on is a 19mm spanner or a 19mm wrench. You're also going to need a T25 Torx key. You're going to need a 4mm hex key. I recommend a nice pair of snips for any zip ties that might be holding something like the motor cable. And then a Sharpie to mark the tension bolts so that you know exactly where to run that in. And if you go step by step, this should be very simple to do. So let's go ahead and get started. All right. Step one is going to be to simply mark the tension bolt. You have a tension bolt on both sides of the bike. You want to just put a dot right there at the edge of the bolt on the threads. This way you know that when you go to reinsert these or reinstall everything, you just have to run that bolt back into that mark, and you'll do that on both sides. This should help you to get the wheel nice and straight between your seat stay and your chain stays. And it should also help you to gain tension back to where you originally had it. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll put a mark on each of those tension bolts, and then we're going to loosen up the axle nuts with the 19mm wrench. So I'm just going to put a dot right here at the edge of the threads on both of the tension bolts. And now we're ready to get started. First step is just loosen the bolts up. You don't have to fully remove the axle nuts. Just loosen them so that you have those free and clear. The wheel eventually will be able to slide nice and smooth. We're going to loosen the right side and the left side. There we go. So that they're nice and loose. The next step is going to be to loosen your tension bolts, and you just want to run these out maybe 1 centimeter or 1.5 centimeters. Once you have enough room basically to push the wheel forward and remove the belt from the front chain ring, that's about as much as you need to loosen those off. You're going to use the 4mm hex key to do that. And again, just simply loosen them up. Once it's out far enough on one side, just go ahead and do the same thing with the other tension screw on the other side. And once you have them far enough out, you'll notice that the wheel will give a little bit of a, you'll give the wheel a bit of a forward push towards the front of the bike, and you'll notice that the tension comes off of the belt. Once you have enough tension off of that belt, you'll simply be able to remove the belt from the front chainring. So we'll go ahead and take that off of there now. So I'm just keeping tension kind of with my fingers pulling out towards the edge, rotating the tire slightly forward, and you'll notice that the belt is going to simply come right off of there. We have the belt free and clear. At this point, it's very simple. You're just going to simply loosen these 4mm bolts on this side right here. Once you've loosened these, or rather take them out fully, the frame is going to come apart. You'll be able to simply pull the belt right on out of there. Let me go ahead and do that for you guys here. 1, 2. So I got them nice and loose. Then I'm going to just go with this side and just run these guys all the way out of there. All right. Make sure, as always, that you put your hardware in a good place, that you're not going to kick it or lose it. And keep working. So we're going to pull these screws out, and you'll notice that the frame is going to simply just come apart into 2 pieces where we can remove the belt. All right, we got those. You'll notice here that the frame stays together really well, but if you just give it a little bit of a push, you should be able to create enough space that you can get the old belt off of there. If you find this difficult at all, I would simply recommend at this point to just remove the rear wheel. You're gonna remove the caliper mount bolt on the bottom and just loosen the top one just a little bit. Don't touch the caliper mounting bolts that are on the top side, as this will change the position of your caliper. By removing the bottom one here and loosening the top one, you'll be able to fold this caliper up or push it up and out of your way, and then the back wheel is gonna simply come right off for you. Go ahead and loosen that off. There we go. Put this piece of hardware off to the side so that you don't lose it. And again, with the top one, go ahead and just loosen this one up so that you have a little bit of movement in the caliper. There we go. When your caliper is in a position where it's up and out of the way, it's not blocking the rotor from being pulled backwards, you should be able to just undo the motor cable from the harness. There may be a zip tie holding the cable down here. If so, go ahead and clip that as well. Once everything is free and clear, you'll be able to just simply pull the wheel right back out and off of the bike. Put the wheel somewhere where it's not going to fall on the rotor or onto the cassette freewheel, so that you don't damage anything. Again, at this point, you're just going to be able to create enough space to pull your belt right off of there. If it's easier, have a friend kind of pull the two pieces apart for you. But I'll just kind of finagle it and get the belt off. Come on now. And with a little bit of effort, your belt is free and clear and it's off. At this point, you're going to grab your new belt and you're just going to do the following steps in reverse order, just the same way that it came off, and you're going to reinstall, starting with putting the belt on. I will indicate to you that you want to make sure that you put the belt on properly. That means that you're going to start with, let's say, this side of the belt over here at the back of the bike. That's going to go inside. You're then going to loop the top of the belt back through the frame so that ultimately what you end up with, let's go ahead and install that. Haha. What you end up with is the back part of the belt inside the frame, the front part of the belt on the outside of the frame. That way everything is lined up properly. At this point, you have your belt installed, so the next part to reinstall is going to be the frame bolts. So we're going to put that back together. The belt can hang out of the way for you for now. When you reinstall these bolts here into the frame, make sure that they're nice and snug. Don't over tighten these too much that you're going to actually strip the bolt's head or the threads, but just get it nice and tight, and at the point that it doesn't give any more, that's nice and snug. That's about where you want to keep it. For safety or precaution, you can always reinstall some Loctite onto the threads. It's an anti-vibration product that will basically keep it'll keep the bolts nice and tight without them rattling loose due to vibration. I recommend it. There we go. We got both of our frame bolts back in and our new belt is installed. We're going to go ahead and insert the back wheel. We're going to put the caliper back down over the rotor, bolt the caliper back on, and then we're going to find the tension with the belt installed on the wheel. We're going to retighten the axle nuts, and then you're going to be ready for your ride. So go ahead and keep along while I reinstall this stuff. Just as a good tip, you guys, you want to make sure that these washers are on the outside of the frame. When everything runs together, these are going to lock into the dropout, holding everything in place. The other tip I'll give you is that you want to rotate those so that the locks are at the back side of the bike. We'll give you a good visual of that when the wheel is installed. So now we're going to go ahead and reinstall the wheel onto the frame. The one thing that you got to make sure is that you get the rear cassette inside the belt before you put the wheel into the dropouts. As we slide the wheel in, you just want to make sure that it catches the caliper, or rather the disc is sitting inside of the brake pads that are in the caliper. There we go. So once you got everything in there, you're gonna go ahead and reinstall the caliper now. And so the next step, you guys are going to just simply pull the caliper down over the rotor, positioning it so that the hole matches up on the inside, and you can go ahead and tighten these back down to the position that they originally were, and then we can finish reinstalling the wheel here. As always, you guys make sure that when you're tightening these bolts down that you do not over tighten them to the point where you're stripping out the head of the bolt, and definitely don't go so hard that you strip out the threads, as this can cause damage that is very difficult to fix and can be very costly. So we'll go ahead and just get those nice and snug. You just loosened the top one up, so just re-snug that one as well, and your brakes are back good to go. While you're over here, it's a good idea to replug the motor in. You'll notice that on each side of the cabling, there's an arrow that indicates where these should go back together. Just match those arrows up, give a good, hard, solid push, make sure everything is as tight as it can be, and your motor is now reconnected. The next step is going to be installing the back wheel, but before we can actually tighten the back wheel and tighten the tension screws, we want to reinstall the belt onto the rear freewheel and the front chainring. And so now with the wheel in its most forward position, you'll be able to reinstall the belt. Start by putting the belt on the rear freewheel first. Start with, and then go to the top of the chainring in the front. The top, you're going to install the belt so that it's sitting where it should with the teeth. And then simply, as you can, rotate the wheel forward and get everything so that it's nice and lined up, and it should sit there nicely. Now the final steps, just reinstalling the wheel completely with tension on the belt. All you're gonna do is give it a good pull backwards. I like to pull it backwards and hold it, if I can, nice and straight. You wanna be sure that your wheel is centered between your seat stays and at the bottom between your chain stays. As long as you have the wheel nice and centered, you can go ahead and give the axle nuts just a little bit of, tighten them just a little bit so that they slightly hold the wheel in place, but don't tighten them down fully, because before we fully tighten the axle nuts, we're gonna run the tension screws back into the original mark that we put on there. As well as keeping the tire straight, you will build tension and you'll be able to tighten your axle nuts, and then you'll be able to go for a fun ride. So go ahead and start to tighten down the tension screws on both sides until you get to the point where that black mark that we made originally is just at the point where it looks like it's about to run into the frame. So I'd say probably one more turn from there. Just rotate it around so I can see where that black mark is. And that looks good to me on that side, and I'm going to do the exact same here on the opposite side of the bike. Just go a little bit more here, probably one more turn, and there we go. Now our tension screws are set. You want to keep a good eye on the tire being centered, again, between the seat stays and the chain stays. My wheel is perfectly centered. I also have tension that is not too much, not too little. There is a measuring tool for tension. I like to just say that I can eyeball it. As long as it's not too tight that it's causing extra resistance on the cranks, and it's not so loose that it's coming off, you're at a good spot right there, and you can kind of temper that to your liking specifically. Now that everything is straight and I got tension on the belt, the final step, you guys, is to grab the 19 mil and just tighten those axle nuts down. Tighten them as tight as you possibly can, because you don't want that wheel slipping or coming off on you at all. That one's tight there. Nice and tight here. All right, there it is, you guys. Go ahead and check that the rotor is not rubbing on the calipers. This indicates that you have the wheel centered exactly as you had it before. I would say enjoy the ride. Let us know, as always, if you have any questions whatsoever with this installation. Otherwise, keep shredding. We're happy to have it.